Before Instagram, if you wanted to slide into someone's DMs, you had one option. You rolled up a tiny piece of paper, tied it to a bird, and hoped for the best. Before any modern form of communication existed, humanity had already figured out how to send a message across hundreds of miles quickly and reliably. Love letters, military orders, trade intelligence, all of it carried on the leg of a bird no bigger than your fist. For thousands of years, it was one of the most trusted communication tools in the world. But why did ancient people ever think a bird, of all things, could be trusted to carry a message? Pigeons were first domesticated roughly 10,000 years ago, kept by ancient peoples for food and for ritual. They lived on rooftops, in grain stores, alongside human settlements. People watched them constantly, and over time, one behavior stood out above everything else. When a pigeon was taken away from its home and released, it flew straight back, every time, without fail. That consistency was the key. People noticed that no matter how far the bird was taken, it always found its way home. And at some point, gradually, across multiple cultures, across many centuries, someone made the obvious next step. If the bird is flying home anyway, attach a message to it. That is all the discovery was. Just a long period of watching, and eventually a practical idea, born from what people saw. But how does a pigeon always find its way home, even from hundreds of miles away, across terrain it has never seen? The reason pigeons can do this at all comes down to biology. They are equipped with a set of natural navigation tools that, combined, make them extraordinarily capable of finding home from great distances. The first is a magnetic sense. Pigeons have magnetite crystals in their beaks and inner ear, a naturally magnetic mineral that allows them to detect the Earth's magnetic field. This gives them a built-in compass that works regardless of weather or visibility. The second is their use of the sun. Pigeons track the sun's position throughout the day using an internal biological clock, using it as a consistent directional reference from morning to evening. The third is visual memory. A pigeon that has flown a route repeatedly memorizes the landscape: rivers, coastlines, mountain ranges, roads. The more familiar the path, the more precise the navigation. Together, these senses make the homing pigeon one of the most capable natural navigators on the planet. Ancient peoples did not need to understand the science. They only needed to know it worked. Using pigeons for communication required one critical understanding. A pigeon can only fly home. It cannot be sent to a new destination on command. It flies back to wherever it was born and raised, and nowhere else. But why would anyone build an entire communication system around a bird that can only fly in one direction? A pigeon was hatched and raised at a specific location: a military headquarters, a city, a command post. That location became its permanent home. It could then be transported anywhere. When released, it would fly back and carry a message with it. To communicate between two cities, you needed pigeons, home to each city kept at both ends. When City A needed to send a message to City B, they released City B's pigeons. When City B needed to reply, they released City A's pigeons. Simple in concept, but it required careful logistics to maintain. Training the birds took time. Young pigeons were taken progressively farther distances from home and released, building their navigational ability gradually. Only the fastest and most reliable birds were kept for active use. Messages were written on thin paper, sometimes silk when weight needed to be minimal, rolled tightly and secured inside a small tube attached to the bird's leg. At scale, this system required dedicated facilities called lofts, full-time handlers, and established networks of routes across multiple locations. In civilizations that relied on it heavily, managing the pigeon corps was a serious professional responsibility. Why did so many civilizations put their trust in this one bird? The use of messenger pigeons spans nearly every major civilization across recorded history. In the ancient world, the Romans, Greeks, and Persians all used them. Military commanders on campaign relied on them to communicate with distant positions. Merchants used them to move commercial information faster than any land route allowed. In the medieval Islamic world, the pigeon post became formal infrastructure. By the 12th century, the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt had established organized networks of pigeon lofts connecting its major cities, used for state correspondence, military intelligence, and trade. In the 19th century, financial markets used pigeon networks to transmit price information between cities, gaining hours of advantage over competitors who relied on slower transport. In an era before the telegraph, those hours had real monetary value. And in the 20th century, both world wars pushed pigeon communication to its absolute limit. Multiple nations, Britain, France, the United States, Germany, maintained dedicated military pigeon corps, deploying thousands of birds across front lines, naval vessels, and forward positions. When telegraph lines were cut and radio communication failed, pigeons were often the only option left. Their success rate under wartime conditions was estimated at around 95%. The messenger pigeon's era ended the same way it began, gradually. The telegraph replaced it for commercial use. Radio replaced it for military use. By the mid-20th century, the conditions that had made pigeons indispensable no longer existed in most of the world. Military pigeon units were disbanded one by one in the decades following World War II. The last known formal military pigeon unit was stood down in the early 2000s. What they leave behind is 10,000 years of service. Across ancient empires, medieval trade routes, and the front lines of modern warfare, a bird weighing less than a pound carried messages that shaped the course of history. No technology, no infrastructure, just instinct, training, and a reliable desire to go home.